Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of GHE Diaries. Today, we have with us Silvia Stefini from Italy, who was part of an expedition in 2018, which was actually the first women leaders expedition that GHE conducted. Welcome, Silvia.
Hello, everybody.
And before we start, Silvia, can we have a quick introduction on your end?
Sure. I'm Silvia Stefini, based in Italy, as you said, and I work in the energy industry. I'm doing advisory work for a couple of big companies engaged in energy transition in Italy and elsewhere. And I joined the expedition in 2018, the first Women Leaders Expedition.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Silvia. And before we start on, the first question that I would have for you is, how did you actually hear about GHE? I mean, let's start from there and then we move on from there, right?
Okay, sure. Yeah, well, I worked for many years in the power generation industry, and I was in G Power. In 2016, I was in Switzerland, and during a large employee meeting, there was a video that was projected with a G Power team joining a trekking expedition in Ladakh, where they were installing power plants. So this video impressed me a lot. It was part of a campaign called Powering Everyone, and I learned about GAG that was in that situation because G Power was working with GAG for that particular expedition. And I was truly impressed by the initiative, which combined, trekking in a really beautiful part of the world, but also supporting local community and providing electrification in villages where there had no light before. So it was a nice proposition. But probably the video impressed me also because the previous year I did a trekking in the Himalaya. This was the first time I went to the region, and
Oh,
it was in Nepal. And it was in mid-April 2015. I was trekking around the Annapurna area, and then I had a lot of interaction with the local people. Then I returned back in Italy, and after a few days, there was the big earthquake in Nepal. And I was shocked because a lot of the people I met were impacted. Some of the villages I visited were impacted. So this brought me closer to the community in the Himalayan region. And seeing the video of Ladakh and seeing how GAG was helping the community in the region, in the Himalayan region, was something I felt very related to. So that's why I was impressed by GAG, and it kept in the back of my brain for some time.
how was that experience like? I mean, you have shared that you've been into the Himalayas. You've probably trekked a little as well. But how was this particular journey like? Reaching the nunnery, the monastery, meeting with the nuns over there. How was that particular part like?
The trekking was took the rest of the day. It was actually easier than expected. Before leaving, I was very concerned about me being able to do the trekking without problems. Because we reached a pretty high altitude. We arrived to was almost 5,000 meters, so it was pretty high. But it was actually very easy. We walk very slowly, waiting each other, and drinking water on the way up. Um, Plus, we didn't have to carry all our luggage because it was taken care so by horses. So it was really easy, the trekking itself. It was impressive to look around ourselves, the mountains, and how dry the environment was. We arrived at the monastery. That was late afternoon because we walked the whole afternoon, and it was starting getting a little bit dark and started being quite cold. So it was we were getting into the night. And arriving at the monastery was very emotional. We were greeted by the Rinpoche, who came for this event to meet us. and there
Uh-huh.
were all the nannies around, and there was really a lot of excitement from their side. Excitement, but also respect. Meaning they were very nice, but very stand on another side. So very very respectful. And they took us in a room where we would have slept, the seven women, the team. It was too cold to stay on a tent outside the village, which is something I understand often is done. But for this expedition, because it was so cold, they created, they gave us a big room for us with mattress, with the seven mattress all around.
Okay.
And it was actually very nice. The room was well organized with a lot of curtains and well, old mattress and a lot of pillows and with different colors, but obviously with no eating. So it was also an opportunity for us as a team to share more, because we were all in one room, like probably a teenager's time. It was like doing a pajama party at a very unusual setting. So we get rested a little bit. But the best part of that day was after dinner. In our room, there were the little nuns came to visit us. There were, in fact, about 10 nuns that were very, very young. I mean, below, they were just students, not just, uh, I would say, between 5 and 10 years old. And
Oh.
we brought some pencils and paper to draw, and they were so happy to stay with us and to draw with us. So we had this wonderful evening, and this we repeated for the following evenings as well. That after dinner they were coming to visit us. It was really very very nice. There was joy and curiosity in their face. Um, and very very nice, and they were trying to communicate, or some of them were speaking English. We also had a couple of people from India in the team who helped in the translation and in communicating, so that was very very warm. And we used lights with batteries to draw. It was not a lot of light, but it was enough to enjoy the evening.
I'm at a loss of words right now. I mean, these communities, these remote communities in the Himalayas, not just Himalayas, but I guess anywhere um, in the mountains, they make us realize of how little we need to be happy with, and we the stuff we take for granted is missing out on them, and they don't have those kind of facilities, but they still find happiness without them. Makes us go back into our lives thinking that takes us down, I guess, for introspection. In my particular case, as I'm listening to these stories, I this is what I'm experiencing for myself. uh,
And very on this topic, maybe one thing, we had an evening where the older nuns came in our room, and we had a discussion about their lifestyle. We heard more about their stories. Some of them became nuns very young, so they left the original villages to join a monastery very young, as the one that were there. There was one nun that joined the monastery that was 24, so it was really a deliberate decision to be part of a nuns, where obviously were the one that were became nuns very young. It was more a decision of the family, which they shared later, but it was not the decision. So also hearing their story, their own personal stories, their willingness to share was really very very nice, and the openness that they had. And we learn about really the little things of their daily life. and that was an eye opener, for the conditions of the people. But on the other side, the attitude towards being happy about what you have every day, and just work to make it better, but with patience and hard work.
True, very true. Sylvia, thank you for that. And now that you've been in the monastery, you've interacted with the nuns, you've interacted with the team. It's now the purpose that you were there for was electrification, right? And how was that experience like? I mean, you were from a energy, a clean energy based background, but like, what was the experience like in terms of the electrifying the monastery, empowering these lives, and making that kind of a difference? What was that experience like?
We had an introduction to electricity, and we were explained what our tasks were. Uh, as a matter of fact, it was very easy to electrify the village because the technology used with the microgrid in this little solar plant was very easy and basic. So we could actually contribute to the electrification. Yeah, I do come from the power generation industry, but I always been, on the commercial side. I'm not an engineer, and I've never really done anything like working on a plant. So it was fascinating for me to see how the work was divided. So the team of the seven of us was dedicated to install the bulbs in each of the rooms. So we spent time with the nuns, understanding where they wanted the light, so where they read and where they cook, where is in the portion of the room where they mostly need the light. And so we put the bulbs on in the rooms, and then we started the connection. But then the actual connection of the electrification was done by these two women engineers that was part of the GHE team. Were two wonderful people. So we did the basic work, the easiest work, and the two women engineers to make the connection with the main battery and the solar panels. But it was everything very easy, and very well organized. And at the end, when the work was done, we have the ceremony of turning the lights on, which was very emotional. I did cry at the moment when it was we were all in the dark, and the sky is very dark in Ladakh, and you can see the stars. It was really an amazing evening, and then suddenly they turned the light on, and the whole monastery got a lot of light, and all the nuns and all the people started, with joy and dancing and um, just kissing each other, and I was really very touched emotionally, and I start crying, but probably because I felt part of making things happening in a very difficult environment. So I felt my little contribution to this, and I just felt really part of the overall celebration. So it was nice, easy and nice. It made me think about how little can you can do to make an impact. I mean, you don't need to make big actions, but this is really a small action that has an impact on the life of people.
I guess it's that part of the journey which is totally different for everyone. And I guess the last thing that I would probably want to ask you is, if you have to suggest, Sylvia, anything to a future participants, let's do it in two parts, right? The first part is probably going to be the women leaders, and then it's going to be the general expeditions where there's more participants. What are your thoughts about? What are your probably any message, any key takeaway points that you want to share for future participants?
Well, for a future participant, I would say, um, joined this expedition because the way it is organized and structured really gives you all the comfort to feel safe in any environment you can be in. So the concern I had at the beginning was about what if something happened in a remote location. What I found out is
Uh-huh.
that GOG is actually well organized, obviously knows very well the territory and can face any issue that may come up. And everything is anyway organized in a way there will be no issues. So everything is taken care in a very excellent way, but there's a strong organization um, around it. So this is something very important to know from everybody. So you can dare, the long expedition, and actually that's what I'm planning to do now is a longer expedition in an even more remote place as soon as will be possible. So organization is great. The other thing that I want to tell participants is that this is really an opportunity to think about two things. One is that it is urgent to take actions on climate change and on sustainable behaviors. And the urgency becomes much clearer after you do this trip. The second aspect is that a small action can have a big impact. So you don't have to take big actions and think about big investments, but your small action every day can have an impact of sustainable behaviors, and that's what this trip help you thinking about.
Thank you for that, Silva. And I guess these are two very important points, um, and not just probably for an expedition, but on a general basis as well, where you need to realize, the climate change is real, and it's time we start taking action. This is one way where we are probably, supporting these communities that are a little behind. I won't say lacking behind, but are a little behind on the development scale as compared to other places around the world. Uh, this has been an awesome conversation with you, Silvia. It's been wonderful talking to you. And before we just wind up this conversation, I know you've shared a lot already, but if you have to share one particular moment or one particular interaction that you've had in the trip that that you hold very close to your heart, and you're never going to forget for the rest of your life, what would that particular moment be?
So, one moment that is stick to my mind is when we were about to leave the monastery at the end of the electrification. So the morning we were preparing the luggage, and I was outside of my room with my luggage, and I saw one little nun who came out of a room, or no, his own room, her own room, and came to me and ran actually towards me and gave me a big hug. And that was a moment very special because it showed gratitude and joy at the same time. But I also felt sad because we were leaving them. We were going back to our life, and they were staying, there without having, the interaction with us. And when we left, we walked away from the monastery. The old nuns were on top of the wall looking at us walking down. And it was very emotional and a little bit sad, for sure, to see that it was the end of the trip and beginning of a new day for them.
That's beautiful, Silvia. Thank you for sharing that. I guess yes, it actually comes down to when you develop this kind of a bond with people that you spend time with, and then you realize that the kind of impact that you've tried to make here in a couple of days is changing their lives forever. Is opening new avenues or opportunities for them to develop and build upon, and that's a beautiful thing, right? And I guess with that, we're done for this conversation, Sylvia. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I must share that throughout the call, throughout the discussion, there were a couple of instances that I actually had goosebumps trying to imagine what the scenario was like, what the feeling was like, and what the intent of the conversations must have felt like. So once again, thank you for your time today.
Very good.